Bang, welcome in everybody. We're going to do somewhat of a quick video today. We're going to do kind of our full College Station regional preview on Wednesday night, I think. So today's going to be a little bit shorter. Before we get into kind of A&M as a 12 seed and then the whole field as a whole, what happened to the conversation around A&M as a top 8 national seed after the Mississippi State series? Because to me, it felt like after that third game, we were all high-fiving and hugging in the stands like, oh, we're a top 8 national seed. And then that sort of just kind of drifted off into tournament play. So what are your thoughts on just kind of what happened to A&M as a top 8 national seed?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it once we got to Ole Miss. It was like 3-3, and you feel really good about being top 8, and all the D1 baseball saying you're top 8 national seed, and then you get to Hoover, and everyone's like, you got to beat Auburn to be a winner gets a top 8 national seed, and it really made no sense. Like there was no consistency of saying what A&M needed to do, and there was just no consistency. And then with the committee, there was again no consistency with this committee, and we can get into that in a few minutes.
Yeah, I think my general thoughts, obviously the big news is A&M is announced as the number 12 overall seed, matched up with the 5 seed North Carolina and the Supers if it happens. Tag and I are watching the show this morning, and obviously we're not surprised that A&M is not the 8 and that it's Florida. We're not surprised, but things got a little weird after Southern Miss is shown as the 9. Then Florida State is shown as the 10, and we're thinking, oh my goodness, they matched us up with Texas as, we're the 11 and Texas is the 6. Thankfully, that did not happen. I don't know. My general thoughts, my take on it is I don't think A&M deserves to be a top 8 national seed, and I can kind of get into that in a second. I mean, do you agree with me, or do you have a different feeling about it?
I think if you didn't get beat the way you did against Auburn, I think you are, in my opinion. But the way you got 2 hits and you lost 8-0, I believe.
7-0. Yeah, I mean
7-0. You didn't you just had it didn't feel like there was a sense of urgency at all that you need to play well, and it was just lackadaisical out there. I'm not saying that's what happened, but they just was not the same A&M team you just saw against Mississippi State, and Auburn was out, like Butch Thompson said, they were out there to win the whole thing. Now that didn't happen, but you could tell that there was two different perspectives of how they were approaching the SEC tournament in that game on Friday night.
The frustration with me is that the team, to me, their vibes going into the game, their vibes even after the game, in post-game interviews, the vibe of the team was that, oh, we're a top 8 national seed. That's how it felt to me. It didn't feel to me like the team felt like they needed to win that game, whereas the more general professional consensus among people who know what they're talking about was if A&M doesn't win this game, they're in trouble. And I just didn't get that same vibe from the team. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not in their head, but that was kind of the vibe that I got, which was a little bit frustrating. But I think the general takeaway is that we're not surprised at all that A&M is not a top 8 national seed. And I guess I could get into that. To me, because I've seen so many people on Twitter flipping out that A&M is not a top 8 national seed. you just didn't do enough. You were right there, but you just didn't quite do enough. And we can get into that. I think that starts with your first conference series against Oklahoma. You lost 2 one-run games. And that's tough. Like you win one of those games. I think the general takeaway for me is if you won one more SEC series, you were a top 8 national seed. Mm-hmm. And that started in Norman, right? That you played a top 10 Oklahoma team. Dropping that series hurt more as the year went on because Oklahoma kind of went like this slowly as they were kind of in a hosting conversation and then they slipped out of it. But yeah, I mean, you take one of those games, the first and third game that you lost were both one-run games. The first game you went up 4-0 and, let go of the lead immediately. So to me, it's just like, if you win that series, we can move to, what was it? What was the Auburn series, that second game? Like, you were literal inches away from taking that second game, which would have given you the series. If you won one of the games at Ole Miss, like A&M to me was just not good enough in those really close games this year where the margin was just like this and they just couldn't quite come out on the other side of it. So that was like my biggest takeaway as to why A&M is not a top 8 national seed.
Yeah, I mean, like we talk about, it starts with the first series, and you really thought that this team was like, I thought this team all year, when they got a lead, they won the game. Like, if they scored first, historic numbers would say this year A&M would win the game, and then like the Ole Miss series was kind of like a red lights, alarms, because you just didn't hit the ball in game one. In game one you didn't hit the ball like at all, and then in game 3 it was once you tied it, you didn't do anything after you tied the game in game 3, and then it was just like a completely different team against Mississippi State. I mean, you go out, win the series very crucially, like the way they responded to adversity, like Early talked about today. This team's responded to adversity really well all year. And then there's just been some bad breaks. Like you've had the injury bug, but everyone's like, it's baseball. Everyone hits the injury bug, but you've hit it especially hard with Partita being out and Chris having lingering injuries and having to maneuver the lineup the way they have, and then having to maneuver the pitching staff the way it is. You just weren't consistently good enough the whole year. It was kind of like a roller coaster at the beginning, and then towards the end it was kind of roller coaster. But in the middle it was great. And everything would have trended towards a top 8 national seed. But Florida got hot at the right time. Then I'm not really going to argue the people below us, because I don't think they have a good enough argument as A&M. But the way the cookie crumbled, I would rather be at 12 in my opinion than be at 9, 10, or 11. So that's the way I think of it.
Yeah. Again, like I'm not frustrated with where A&M is. Like, if the committee is going to make a decision, like, that's fine, and I'm totally good with most of their logic. But the one thing that frustrates me is just, if you're not consistent with your logic, then that's where things get frustrating. Something that I haven't heard anybody talk about is that you'll remember the last midweek of the year against Prairie View, A&M did not cancel that game. And we knew going into that game, right? Prairie View is like in the 200s in the RPI. If you lose that game, you drop a ton of spots. Even if you win, you dropped like
we dropped
8 spots.
We dropped
something. Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah, run will win. So
yeah, so A&M wins the game against Prairie View, and they drop a few spots. A&M could have canceled that game, and they chose not to. They chose to play with the risk of losing. You look at something else. You look at Oregon. Oregon canceled their last midweek of the year, and they're sitting in the 11th spot. They're ahead of A&M. And so to me, what the committee is screaming is that, like, whether they thought this could be something that they just didn't even think about. But what that says is, if you play a really, really poor RPI team, you should just cancel the game.
Yeah,
you should just cancel it, and there's no reason to play it. And A&M's not getting rewarded for not canceling that game.
No, I don't think it's right to just cancel a scheduled game just because it's going to save your RPI. I don't think that's right with how with how the state of college baseball is. But if you're if you're trending to be a top 8 national seed, you have to do it. Like at this point, it's history shown the last two brackets where teams that have they're ignoring head-to-head matchups and going solely based off RPI, and in my opinion. And so it's like if you could just RPI boost yourself into top 10 and you have your resume is good enough, if for like A&M, if you're a top 10 RPI team, you would for sure be a lock to be top 8 national seed because you're in the best conference that there is in college baseball. So it's just some nitpicking things like why is Florida State in front of Texas A&M? I don't get it. Why is Southern Miss more losses and half or a third of the quad one games? It makes no sense because when you look at what this A&M team has faced in the non-conference, they faced Arizona State, they faced number 1 UCLA, they faced did I say Virginia Tech made a regional too? It's like they did, and then the commissioner the committee chair comes out and says A&M non-conference strength of schedule is the reason why they weren't this. So it makes A&M did try to play these teams, but like when you look back at other teams like Georgia, for instance, they're playing Long Island and they were playing whoever in the non-conference, but since they won the league, they're going to be 3. Like I get it, just your logic needs to be the same all the way through, and it just wasn't.
Yeah. I agree with everything you just said. The general impression to me is that A&M lost 2 non-conference games this year. One was to the number 1 team in the country, the national championship favorite, and another was to Texas State, who's also a tournament team. And it doesn't feel like they're being rewarded for that. No. The other thing is, like you talked about luck with injuries and the roster and all of those things. They also got really unlucky with some of these games, which is that they were going to play UTSA, and that game got canceled due to rain. That's not A&M's fault. If they win that game, that's an RPI booster, absolutely. You also didn't play game 3 against Texas. And I said earlier that maybe you just needed one more SEC series win. Maybe it was just one more SEC win itself, right? Because if you had beaten Auburn, you're a top 8 national seed. If you had beaten them in the SEC tournament. So if that game 3 is being played against Texas and you win that game, you're probably a top 8 national seed. I don't think A&M got enough credit for the win against Mississippi State, the series win against Mississippi State, right? Purely mathematically, like, okay, Mississippi State's RPI is here and A&M beat them, so their RPI is going to do this. But how about you look at the series and say A&M beat Mississippi State without one of their starting pitchers, and they had a starting pitcher start twice in one weekend. And they didn't have other key pieces of their lineup, and they still won that series against Mississippi State, who's a regional host. Mm-hmm. So, I know the math says, oh, Mississippi State's RPI is this and A&M's is this. And so this is what that's going to do to their resume, but they should have gotten, in my opinion, more credit for that win. Yeah. That's really impressive.
And then there was something else I wanted to add real quick about like who these teams have beat. Like, I think if we're looking at A&M, they've beat number 4 in series this year. A&M has beaten the number 14 overall seed, number 8 overall seed, and the number 6 overall seed. And I believe Georgia has just beaten number 4, number 12, and 14. If my thing is adding up, but like that, they also talked about in conference strength of schedule. A&M has played Florida, Georgia, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss, all teams at the top echelon of the conference, and then he's applying it to when they're talking about A&M, and the logic it's not there because A&M strength of schedule in conference is up there with some of the best because like we talked about scheduling different games. Like Kentucky's strength of schedule is going to be harder than A&M's because they're bottom 4 in the league. But for these teams that are at the top and they're playing the topper competition, like it's not adding up with their logic, and that just makes me more surprised of why they're 12. I fully understand they're not maybe top 8, but the fact that they were 12 is what I got upset about.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because we're talking like I want things to be done right, and I think if things were done correctly, A&M is the 10 or the 11 seed. Even though they might have been matched up against Texas, which we both, I don't think, love for A&M in a super. So, I mean, I'm fine with them at 12. But But yeah, I mean, Chag and I are not saying that A&M was screwed over or that, we were shocked about what happened. Like, they didn't play well enough. They were not good enough in one score, one run, two run games this year, which is just so crucial in this conference. Like, being able to win these close games, A&M was not able to do that this season. Most of their conference wins, they won by a lot, and that's just kind of how it went. And that has to do, in my opinion, with the pitching staff. But I mean, we can talk about that later. A&M was not good enough in close games, and that hurt them this season.
Yeah. And then there's one more specific thing before we get into our regional I want to talk about, and it does include our conference, but there was one that I was actually very upset with inside the top 8 national seed conversation of why Auburn was 4 and North Carolina was 5. It felt like, in my opinion, North Carolina was punished for losing the ACC title game against Georgia Tech. Watching that tournament, North Carolina kind of ran out of pitching towards the back half of the ACC championship game, while Auburn lost the semifinal game. That was kind of the main thing for me. It's like, why? Like we talked about it. If A&M doesn't show up to Hoover, their top 8 national seed, you can't do that, obviously. But if North Carolina declines to play that game, they're probably ahead. They're probably ahead of Auburn, and it's just with the RPI, like, some things have to matter more than RPI. Like a conference title appearance for a top 4 team should not knock you down because you played the number 2 overall seed. Like that, in my opinion. Now, they could say, they lost by 5 or 6, and that's why it was quote unquote not competitive final score when looking at it. But in my opinion, like, Auburn lost to Arkansas in the semifinal. They didn't even make the title appearance. And for this, the second best baseball conference, the team that made the tournament championship and that was up there with them vying for a top 4 seed, and they didn't get it. It was kind of that kind of made me kind of upset.
Dylan, so DSR is, I don't exactly know how it works, but essentially you can think of it kind of like a power rating system, which is that it's a team's probability of beating an average college baseball team is the best way to describe it. It's, uses strength of schedule, margin of victory, things like that. It's like, so obviously UCLA is at the top. They would be favored against every other baseball team on a neutral field. It's kind of like that. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's like a power ranking system.
So how I'm going to, like, we'll get into our regional now. Like, USC is very good against not anyone other than quad 1 opponents. They're, I believe, 1-11 against quad 1 teams. But they're really good against the mediocre quad 2, the quad 3s. And so is Texas State. So, like, that's why they're in that metric, they're making it seem like the College Station Regional is very, very difficult for A&M. But in my opinion, like they talk about USC having legit pitching, and yet in those quad 1 games, the pitching was not, like, nowhere to be found. So therefore, that gives me confidence in that. And they're making Lamar seem as Lamar being much more difficult opponent than they were. Like, we saw him firsthand. Yes, it was a midweek, and obviously it's much different than a weekend series. But when you put up, like, I believe 20 runs against Lamar, and they're believing you as one of the tougher 4 seeds, like, I just don't see it.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it. Very quick thoughts on each team, because we're going to do a full preview on Wednesday. But who is the scariest team in A&M's regional? Obviously, they're hosting 2-seed USC, 3-seed Texas State, and 4-seed Lamar.
I think it's Texas State. The way they can swing it, it kind of concerns me with the struggles of A&M's pitching staff. And I'm not really like, USC worries me because they're top. I believe they were finished second in the Big Ten this year. But when we talk about when you listen to the broadcast, they're like, they're a pitching dominant team, and we get stats sent over by Dalen. Thank you, Dalen. And that all their starting pitching struggles against quad 1 opponents, and A&M is probably the best lineup aside from Georgia Tech. I don't see them as the major threat. I see it as Texas State because they can hit with this A&M lineup, and we've seen it twice now. But yeah.
Yeah, you beat. I agree with you. By the way, it's definitely Texas State. You beat Lamar. I mean, you shoved them into a locker early, and you did not let them out. You beat them
Mhm.
25-5 in the regular season. Obviously, Texas A&M played Texas State twice this season. They took the first game in College Station and dropped the second one in San Marcos. And then obviously you haven't seen USC. They're a Big Ten team. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like Texas State is absolutely the scariest team in this regional, but you can't be scared of people. I mean, you are now you're competing for a national championship is what you're doing right now.
Mhm.
If you make it to your super, you're going to face a really good team, whoever that is, if it's North Carolina or Tennessee or whatever. And then if you make it to Omaha, you're going to face the best teams in America. So we can't, you're going to play good teams from here until your season
Mhm.
ends. Looking at USC, because that's the debate, right? The scariest team is either going to be Texas State or USC.
Mhm.
Yeah, USC has, they're a top 5 team nationally in ERA. They have 2 really, really, really sick starting pitchers, but they're 1-11 in quad 1 games. So, they sort of flex on teams that they are much better than and that they are much more
Mhm.
talented than. But then you look at them in Big Ten play, they're not, that pitching is, they've given up a lot of runs against really good
Mhm.
teams. And so, but on the other hand, Texas State has already beaten you this year, and they were super competitive with you in College Station.
Mhm.
So, Texas State's obviously the scariest team. Do you have any quick thoughts on maybe just like how A&M might handle their pitching this weekend now that
Yeah,
we know who you're
I
going to
think
play in the first game?
yeah, I think like we've discussed about this off air. Like, do you start Cooper Powell in game one, or do you start Cole Hubert? I think you do. Like, in my opinion, I think you do. You did it against them the first time. You kind of, even though they scored 5 runs, it was over quick. So even if they do score 5 runs against this staff, like you still feel very good against this offense against Lamar's pitching. But like the way Cooper Powell's throwing the ball, I feel very confident in that he could get the start. But like they could go full bullpen game again, and you see Darden start 2 times this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't care how you win the first game. I don't care if you win the first game 30-29. Like, I don't care if, freaking Sawyer Farr is pitching in game one. Like, you are going to hit Lamar around. You're going to score a lot of runs. Um, there's no need to pitch anybody that you're going to need in game two. Game two, that 1-0
Yeah.
game against either USC or Texas State, is absolutely the most important game of A&M season when it happens. Going down and then having to beat one of those teams twice in the finals is not a good. That doesn't look good with A&M's limited pitching. So you absolutely have to win that 1-0 game on Saturday. So yeah, I mean, you can start Cole Hubert. You can start anybody that has pitched in midweek games this year, and then you have to go all in that second game to win that
Mhm.
one.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
we hopefully know more on we assume Wednesday or Thursday when he gets interviewed about Sims's questionability availability this weekend. We've already seen that Partita's good to go for this weekend and that he would have played against Auburn if it wasn't rainy environment in Hoover. So that's a good sign. Your lineup's about to be at full strength again. So that's good news. But yeah, if Darden throws about 40 pitches on game one, you very well will see him back again on Sunday. It's will you start him? I'm of the belief that you will throw if that's the case. If you're going well, you could use um, any of one of those guys we just listed and not have to use your fresh corn. You don't have to use Sadeo. You don't have to use Moss. And if you can piece it together like that, if you use maybe you do start Darden and you limit it. Maybe you burn them for the weekend, maybe, but you save some of your arms and you use Hunter Bond and Cole Hubert and Hunter Vincent and Cooper Powell and guys like that in game one to solidify the win. And then you come back on Saturday, weather permitting. At this like weather right now, who knows what it's going to be. Does not look. I'm not going to say I'm not going to be the weatherman, but it doesn't look great. But weather permitting, Saturday you have Sims, you have Moss, you have Sadeo, you have Fresh Corn, all ready to go to win that game because that is the most, like you just said, it's the most crucial game this season, and you're facing 2 teams that are very capable of beating you. It's just, yeah, these teams are every team you will play from here on out is very good, and they all have the capability of winning.
Yeah, and I have this very uncomfortable, weird feeling in my stomach about Sims, and I don't know why. Early, it was asked about him again today. He said that he's feeling really good. That's what he said. I don't know what that means. I mean, they're not going to say exactly, but I don't know. I mean, you would hope he's available. I'm going to guess that he's going to be available this weekend, but that's not confirmed, and they've been kind of wishy-washy about him. So, um, yeah, we'll talk about that on Wednesday night when everything comes out, and then yeah, that's kind of everything I had to say. Do you have any other closing thoughts?
No, other than that, this weekend's going to be great baseball, not just at College Station, but throughout the country, and it's just an exciting time to watch baseball, even if it's not the Aggies. Just turn on the 9 inning broadcast from on ESPN, and it's always great time to be a college baseball fan.
Agreed. Dylan, start. Look. Dylan and I have been on the same team since the win versus or the loss to Auburn. Dylan and I have been on the same team for a while. Dylan, I will die on this hill. I would love to see Clayton Freshcorn start a game in this regional.
If he starts
we'll
the 1-0 game, I feel like the crowd is going to be just
Oh, I would
I
lose
feel
my
like
mind.
the crowd's rooting for it. So
Yeah.
if he starts the 1-0 game, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But I think you have to rely on Sims, in my opinion. Like he's been your horse all year. If he's available, he will throw that game. So that's just my opinion. And if you don't use him in the 1-0 game, who's starting in that regional final, in my opinion, it will be Freshcorn, in my opinion. But the other team does have to beat you twice. So if you do see Moss, if everything goes to plan, don't be upset, guys.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, we'll be back on Wednesday night. We're gonna do full preview, full breakdown of all three teams in A&M's regional. We'll talk about Lamar and kind of that first game. We'll talk about the plan if they lose or win. We'll kind of just go across the whole tree. It'll probably be our longest episode ever. All right. Yeah, we'll see you guys then. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you on Wednesday night, and then we will see you Friday evening at Olsen.